Morning, G. How are we?
Super.
Oof.
Do we have some material to work with here?
And we've got no answers. Can we just put that? Can we just put that on the table straight away? I said last week was a race in three. All three got rolled. So I don't know what we're doing with Seedings today.
Upheaval.
Yeah. How good's footy? Like, it is great. And the roundup coming is just ridiculous. But to have so much, so many wild swings in game and with your thoughts or your views on where you were pre-game. So we're loving footy at the moment. It's terrific, isn't it?
And the numbers through the gate will tell you we're obsessed like rarely before. The King's Gambit for Victoria Police, made for more search police careers.
I'm going to start with a little pop quiz for you.
Ooh.
So I think the most valuable players in the competition at the moment are goal-kicking mids, guys that can win their own ball but still step forward and hit the scoreboard. There are 5 players in our competition now, the red diamonds, the rarest of diamonds, that average 20-plus disposals per game and a goal a game. So 20-plus and a goal-plus per game. Any idea who they would be? Stick with the marquee players.
Right, so I'd have Bontempelli.
Bontempelli's in there, 25 and 1.5 goals. He's kicked 12 goals already. Fantastic start to the year. He's the second ranked.
Am I putting Nick Daicos in?
No, you wouldn't be doing that.
No.
You got stay with Isaac Heaney. He's at 27 and 13 goals for the year. Chad Warner's at 24 and 10 goals for the year. Josh Kelly's having an understated year. Keep mentioning him. 26 disposals and 10 goals for the year. And Hawthorn Francis is the other one. 21 and 1 goal a week. So he's only played the 6 games, but he's kicked 6 goals.
So was the order there 1 Heaney, 2 Bontempelli?
Heaney, Bontempelli, Warner, Kelly, Hawthorn Francis. So that's in an order of goal tally. So it takes you to what an asset this is. Okay, and we'll get to the Swans later on because I think when you look at the Sydney Swans, what they've got in the middle is just ridiculous. Heaney, Warner, and Gordon. How many goals do you reckon those three have kicked combined? Your midfielders, Heaney, Warner, and Gordon.
I'm going to say 25.
30 goals.
Oh, right.
30 goals from your key three in the middle of the ground. Most teams would be getting, 6 to 8 max at this stage. Maybe 10 if you're lucky. But to have 30. I mean, McDonald, Hayward, and Amadi are 17, 15, and 13. So there's 45 from your key forwards and 30 from your midfield. So this is what we're talking about. We're talking about where you can steal a march on the competition. And it's just food for thought. So we're always talking about damage from midfield players. So there's some that are accumulators but don't necessarily hit the scoreboard. So you look at Sam Walsh. He's at 33 disposals a week. Hasn't hit the scoreboard at all yet. Now, I know he's missed a little bit, but if he's to get into that conversation of best players in the comp, he has to hit the scoreboard. And they need someone else. I mean, we talk about the big pair up forward. Outside of those guys, Cripps has been the one getting forward, but they need more from their midfield in terms of scoreboard contribution. Sarong's 33 disposals a week, and he's kicked 3 behinds for the year. So can he now go to that next level? And then you got Merritt and Daicos. So Daicos has kicked 6 goals for the year, and that's averaging 30 touches a week. It's ridiculous, isn't it? They're big numbers. So he's just short of a goal a game. And this is the one thing that Zach Merritt's added to his game. He's 30 touches a week, and he's kicked 6 goals 4. So we're talking about him in a different way this year than what we have in the past because he's the complete player at the moment. Defensively doing it, but now really challenging the opposition going forward. And Treloar's always in there. Treloar's a sneaky one because he gets so much ball. So there's only 5 players that are averaging 30 plus, and 4 of those 6 are hitting the 3 of those 5 are hitting the scoreboard. Sarong and Walsh have got some scope for improvement.
The rare jewel that is the goal-kicking mid. The big issue is clearly the Bulldogs. So that's the King's Gambit for Victoria Police, looking for a career that gives you more. Search Police Careers, Victoria Police, made for more. How are you coming at the Bulldogs problem after now 8 weeks of footy, 3 and 5?
Yeah. It's a shock that they've been beaten by Hawthorn, but I'm not necessarily shocked that this is not going to be their year. And I'm a bit I think the Western Bulldogs get overs with all reviews. And we've said this before. We've said this for weeks, that I think Luke Beveridge, how do you tell your team they're ugly? We've had this chat. Like, I think they're rebuilding and resetting on the run. Not a full rebuild, but it's a list that needs work on their last 6 selected players. And it's the same names, it's the same people. And Luke Beveridge is carrying the can for that at the moment. Now I'm not sure whether that's right or wrong or it doesn't really matter. We're just here to talk about performance. It's the same problem. So you can put the problem down to coaching. I don't think they win the ball back enough. I've said this for ages, and we've talked about having Norton go back. They refuse to change that. If you look at the absolute numbers and take personalities out of it, they've only had 3 poorer intercept games in the last 10 years. 48 intercepts. That's an incredibly low number. Most teams are around the high 60s on average. So 48 is just not. 60% of your scoring comes from winning the ball back from the opposition. So if you're not winning it back, you're just totally affecting your whole scoring profile. And they got, I think it was 2 goals 4 from turnover. They've only had 3 poorer results than that in 10 years. So those numbers are alarming. So the game's not set up right. And he talks about we turned the ball over in spots that didn't allow us to do this and didn't allow us to do that. It goes for 120 minutes. I won't wear that 2 goals 4 from turnover is because of 6 mistakes. It's a mistake-riddled game. So I think the post-match press conference doesn't really match where they're at. We would just love them to come out and say, look, we know this year we're probably not this team that everyone's talking about. Everyone says, they're a top 4 list because of a comment made with us on crunch time.
Last year.
Round 6 last year. It's a big gap from round 6 last year to round 8 this year.
Yeah, they still expected to be making finals this year. It doesn't really matter whether we expected them to or not. That was their expectation.
Yeah, but who said who?
That was clearly on record from
who?
I think from the coach and the chief executive.
Yeah, I think the chief executive has to say that. I never listen to those comments. Further you go up the chain, the further you get away from reality.
Yeah. So I just want to, are they really a profile that shouldn't be, so they're nowhere near the 8. I think the first 8 rounds tells us that. Their 3 wins hold no cachet whatsoever.
Yeah.
They're an interesting study against Melbourne, who very much are evolving before our eyes, and they're evolving whilst winning at the high end, and they're playing a clutch of players in single figures. So I totally accept the search for the bottom 6. I'm just not sure that the glut of their team is well experienced, set up and ready.
Whose team?
The Bulldogs.
The Dogs.
Yeah. And they're forced to fiddle at the bottom a bit. But it feels to me like Melbourne are doing a more substantive evolution within a season than the Bulldogs.
Why?
How it looks to me.
They May lever. Who are the main levers at the Dogs?
Oh, so we're just starting with Bontempelli and
but Bont they're winning games.
So they've got
didn't play yesterday.
238 games. Bontempelli 223 games. McRae 235 games. Liberatore 221 games. There's a thicket of players between 120 and 200, and then there's just a few down the bottom. So Charlie Clark plays his first game.
I don't mean
Darcy's
inexperienced.
Evolving.
I don't mean inexperienced. I just mean not good enough.
Yeah.
So in terms of bottom 6 to 8 players, I just mean not impacting games. I don't know how many games they've played. Some of them would have played 100 games and are not impacting games. So I don't think it's necessarily your birth certificate nor games played or how experienced you are. I talk about absolute performance. I don't think they've got that. I don't think the list is where others say. I don't think it's a top 4 list. So if we keep saying that they've got to get more and they've got to be top 4, I don't think that'll ever be the case with this group. I do think they have to regenerate on the run. And then the question is, if they're doing that, is it with the coach? So I'm a believer in Bevo. I think if it's a rare type of person that can win you a flag. Yeah, they won a flag for 50 years. Then they win that flag. Now, most common sense people would say, hey, whatever happens from here happens. We've got our premiership. They go to another grand final. And I think maybe they've wrung the rag dry on this group. And they know that. But they don't come out and say that because as soon as you say that, you send the club into a downward spiral, and it's hard to hang on to players and it's hard to attract players.
So what's the purpose of their year from here when they're 8 rounds in? And they know.
Yeah.
So whether they expected it or not, they now know. So what's the purpose of the remainder of their year?
Same as every other coach. You want performance. They shouldn't be losing to Hawthorn. We're not absolving any results. But if you're talking the overarching long-term view, is to get answers on the list. who is actually taking us to the promised land? If that's to be, say they put a timeline on it, say they say 3 years, we want to have one last tilt with Bontempelli, and they're setting. Okay, does that involve English? Are we better off allowing him to leave and getting the pick? Does it involve Bailey Smith? Does it involve who does it involve, and what can we get for them in the short term? And let's get to market, because you've got to be in for players now. You've got to get answers on players that are potentially coming to your football club at round 12. Not the notion that it happens in October is ridiculous. It gets signed off in October, but you find them now. Your irons are already in the fire. You're getting answers now. They'll know what's happening with Bailey Smith, and they'll know what's happening with Tim English. They might not be absolutely full stops, but they'll have a great guide. So these things are happening well down the path. So I think they're well aware that this group's short of the mark, and you can keep bashing your head against a brick wall for 5 years in this cycle and finish somewhere between 6th and 12th for half a decade and achieve what? So sometimes I do think you have to reset, take one step back to potentially take 2 steps forward. Now, if that's with Bevo, great. And if it's not, well, you shake hands. But I think he's a proud man. I don't think that he will be sacked. I think he'd walk in and do what Damien Hardwick's done last year. Seen the template, it works. Go and have a spell. Your career's done at the Dogs, but it's not done in coaching. I still think there's opportunities for Bevo going forward. Coaches are weirdos. The good ones are weirdos, Gerard. So don't get consumed with his personality and what he is. He's a bloody good coach. He's won a flag. Let's give him some credit there. And then I think you allow the Dogs to make their own decisions.
This was the day that the Hawks needed through the growing pains of rebuild that have really grabbed hold of them in the first couple of months.
Yeah, so full credit to Sam Mitchell on this one. So we're talking about the intercept game, all right? So there's two parties in that. There's what the Hawks do with the footy, and there's what the Dogs are doing to win it back. So if you only turn the ball over 11 times, bringing the ball out of your defensive half, that is an unbelievable number. That'd be, I reckon, close to a third of the AFL average. That's ridiculous. That is stand up and clap stuff. That just minimises all opportunity for the opposition to get some easy scores and build pressure from the scoreboard point of view. I was wrapped with the games of some of the kids. Like Kelsha Deer, they're such a great story. We're all hooked to that story from the minute they released the Jack Gunston video, and then to see Jack play a similar sort of game to Kelsha. They both hit the scoreboard, both kicked a couple of goals, was terrific. We've been waiting for Newcombe and these guys in the midfield to have a bit of a day. He's had a funny year, Newcombe. He's been up and down, and when he's on, he's great. And they got smacked at clearance. Every time the game stopped, the Dogs took complete control. But in flow, and you can that can be a one-off, that can be whatever. But it was an unbelievable performance from the Dogs, and particularly Marcus Bontempelli. And they didn't have an answer there, but. No, I really enjoyed watching Weddle play. Although he did some things, particularly coming off Jamara at times. Connor McDonald was terrific. Jack Ginnivan, he fascinates me, Jack. I love watching him play. He did some really clever things, particularly late in game when the game had to be shut down. He was significant. And the little fella come on, Nick Watson, and gave him a bit of a spark at the end there. Sicily going forward. It had everything. I think Warple's had a very good year. Yeah, a lot of people talking about him for the first 4 weeks and not much since. I think that he's still stacking a pretty good season. Good to see Will Day out there and roaming around, but it was a complete team performance. I know we too flippantly talk about individuals and guys who got the numbers, but everyone had their turn in the sun. It was just a refreshing day for the Hawk fans.
Sicily's bravery. So he's not having a great year, and there have been moments where it looks like it's weighed heavily on him, but he pops the shoulder and then swings down forward to have a say in things. And so you can laugh about it in hindsight, but the rather hilarious moment where he can't get the hand pass to Watson, which I'm sure involves the shoulder issue, and then Watson misses, and Sicily just the emotion totally gets hold of him as he throws his hands to his head, and then he's there kicking the sealer.
Yeah, he had his Richo moment, didn't he?
He did.
It was the Richo moment with David Roden all them years ago. You can't do that. Like, be the younger player that's just missed the goal. You're in your first year of footy. Everything's coming at you pretty big. It's a tough initiation. You're in a club that's been battling a little bit across the first couple of months, and you've got the chance to win the game, and at that stage you've blown it. You're the reason. Like, you don't need the captain showing that sort of emotion. You really don't. You need the opposite. Hey, we'll be right. Get another opportunity in 2 minutes. That sort of language. And I understand it's emotional and it's at its highest at that point, but that's why you're captain. To be able to say, hey, this is a tough game, and appreciate you've been going ordinary yourself. So, hey, I'm 5 minutes in. Give me some love. So I thought that was really poor, to be fair. And yep, well done. He corrected it and settled the troops and kicked the big goal at the end. But you want more of a cuddle from your captain than a kick in the guts at that stage.
All right. So that's yesterday afternoon or early evening, and then we went into the night game, which was a huge success in Brisbane. Crash is going to join me shortly. So that's 30,000 plus, biggest crowd at a Q Clash. It was there because today's a public holiday, so that worked. And the open question is simply, how did the Lions do it? How did they absorb all of that and still dominate to the degree that they did?
Well, I thought their ball movement, the Lions, was as good as we've seen for sometimes early. And there's two parties to this. There's, did the Suns turn up? And we'll have our chat about them in a moment. But that first quarter, they scored 21 points out of the defensive 50. That's their best quarter of football from defensive 50 for about 8 years. So I know that the opposition play a major part in that. But you can only control what you can control. They've been listless down back without Kitty Coleman. That ball use, that dynamite left leg of his. So to see them do that was terrific. Lockie Neal responded as most thought he would. I thought if you want to talk about the game, I thought Matty Rao was going to have an impact on this game. You are the toughest of beasts in the midfield at the moment. Just couldn't get near it. And then the flow and effect, they made them look second-rate, Brisbane, and there's something in that, I reckon. And then we'll get to the injury side of it in a moment. But I thought their key players were dominant. Harris Andrews back to his best, looked terrific. Lockie was great, and the rest just flows on from there. I mean, Zorko just couldn't stop finding the footy. He had something like 38 kicks or something, didn't he? 35 kicks or something. So it comes together. It looks good when it works for Brisbane, but there's a little asterisk on this one given the opposition and their lack of effort.
Okay, so the injury side of things, it's an incredible amount to absorb and to triumph, and Fags is there in the aftermath saying, as good a win as I've been involved in, and he's been involved in footy for decades.
Yeah.
And then you have to count the cost. So one is separate to the other. Is victory at any cost? There's deep philosophies on these sorts of things. It still could be the night that crushes their campaign. They now have 5 ACLs across the recent history, but to lose McCarthy and Gardner, as well as your garden variety injuries along the way, they're properly in the grip of it.
Yeah, they are. And, you just feel that they're just having that year. They've had pretty much a clean bill of health for 5-6 years. They've probably had the best injury profile of anyone. And now they're on the flip side. Now they're living what they've played against for a while. McCarthy's a big out, like he doesn't always jump off the page as a must-have when you look at their lineup, but he's a significant contributor. He's an awkward matchup. If you get that matchup wrong, he hits the scoreboard. He often takes the intercept type defender, the Tom Stewart types. He can play a role on those guys. So to me, it's a night that you don't recover from. Now that doesn't mean that they're going to roll on with some kids, and some of their kids look really good. Like they call me Bruce. How good was Bruce? Hey, he looked terrific. He fitted in really well. The kid Morris that had played in the reserves, he looked really good. So sometimes the kids can surprise you, and Fags has got no other option but to play them now. Just embrace that, and away you go. And who knows? Sometimes you can just unearth something that wasn't really in the planning. There's genius found through absolute desperation at times.
Yep.
And sometimes you just got to trust these kids. He's got no other option now but to carry some of those in the game and just close his eyes every now and then.
The curiosity, it was Gold Coast. So this was Damien Hardwick in the aftermath of, it was listless defeat.
Sometimes you go in not wanting to believe what the coach is saying, but with Damien, I feel like I want to believe what he's saying, and everyone says, it's the same old Suns. It's not the same old Suns. He's 8 weeks in. he's publicly said that 80% of the list that he's got 80% of the premiership list there, and I reckon he's working out who the 20% are. And I look at Daicos and I think, are you the 20 or are you the 80? You know, we've had a couple already fall by the wayside, and you know, if you're guys that have been around a little while and you're struggling to find a bit of form, I'd be nervous. He's there to win him a premiership. He's not there to make friends. So he'll be demanding more out of a Swallow. He'll be demanding more out of a Ben King, demanding more out of a Ben Long or a Charlie Ballard. Like, are you guys actually going to be here and the reason we win big games? We talk about preliminary finals. PFI, we put this in the conversation 4 years ago. If those guys are not going to deliver now, are you going to be able to deliver in a prelim in 2026 or 2025? Whenever it comes, it comes. So that's where I think he's at. So you've got to give him some time under his plan, under the heat of game day, to work out which are the 20% that need to be purged. And if you get something for them, great. And if you don't, well, they're gone. So be it. But that's where I think he's at.
Yep. Could they have got more out of last night?
Oh, they were poor.
Yeah.
They were awful last night.
Especially once the cards fell the way they fell.
We're talking about performance versus, individual one-game performance versus the long term. I think that's Damien when he talks like that in the post-match. That's what he's talking about, the long term. They were awful. Awful. They played with no energy, no real thirst for the contest. They had to defend for long periods because they just couldn't win the ball back. Their intercept game was awful as well. They got something like 2 goals. Where is it? 2 goals, 5. Yeah, 17 points. 60% of your scoring is turnover. If you get 17 points from turnover, you're going to get smashed. So they needed to be better, and it wasn't just the guys that we're talking about that are easy to purge. It was their top liners like Matty Rowell. He just couldn't get his hands on the ball. He really couldn't. 2 clearances for the day. 2 clearances. He's been getting 8s and 10s.
Yeah.
So, no, their top 2 or 3 lowered their colours. The amount of panic handballs where they just smashed the ball, they just handballed the ball forward 15 metres to no one. Daicos doesn't bend down and pick up the ball, kicks it off the ground straight back to the opposition. They kicked to the loose man behind the ball for Brisbane, I reckon, about 6 times in the space of 5 minutes when the game was still working itself out. And you straight away went, they're not invested in this today for whatever reason. And they're past that. They're not that young team that we just go, they're young. They're not that anymore. So I reckon it'll be a tough review today.
The curiosity that is the Suns. Let's do the best bit. So we did 5 goals and the 5 virtues of the round and just held one back deliberately because the best bit of the round was Nick Daicos.
Oh, he's just unbelievable, isn't he? I get sick of. I don't get sick of talking about him. People get sick of me talking about him. Last year he was a phenomenon. You know, before the injury that cost him the Brownlow, he was just unreal. And talk about player ratings. All right, so to be an All-Australian player, you have to rate across the course of the season about rating of about 15. You know, good players go at 12 and hold that. You know, bounce up and down a little swings. So there's 2 main ways to look at it. So Champion have broken this down to ball use and ball winning. They're the main aspects of it. If you look at the last 4 weeks, so after round 4, he was ranked 75th in the comp for ball use, and I thought that's really not him. Like he's better than that. Since then, he's rounds 5 to 8. He's number 1 in the comp for ball use. So 14 rating points just on ball use. 14. The next best is about 10.5, which is Tex.
Yep.
Right, so that's a 40% gap first back to second.
Yep.
Huge. If you look at his ball winning ability, so he's clearly number 1 with ball in hand, and it's all about impact. That's impact and influence. That's not volume. So it doesn't matter how many he's getting. It's the scoreboard that's coming, impact that's coming from it. And he's top 6 in the comp for ball winning. So he's the best in the comp at using it, and the top half a dozen for winning the footy. If you take out the 2 rucks, which I think, because rucks get to grab the ball out of the ruck and they get overs on the data, right? So if you take out Gawn, I think the other one's pitted it because he grabs the ball out of the ruck. If you take the ruckman out, he's top 4 in the comp for winning the ball and the best in the comp for using it. I don't know if I've seen a player like that. So the last 4 weeks, he's rating 26 rating points. 26. That's in front of any other player for a month, I would say. I'm just guessing that. I haven't spoken to Champion this morning. But I think you'll find Horny tomorrow night with Gerard and Kane. We'll be talking about the month that Nick Daicos has had and has blown up their data, because he's untaggable, but you need to invest some sort of plan to negate his influence.
And how smart was that final play to be able to conjure that goal at that stoppage?
You know, your mad mate Craig Jennings. He had a lot of quirky sayings and different things. He used to talk about the Pareto principle.
The Pareto player.
Yeah. So the Pareto principle is 80% of the problems are from 20% of the source. So there's only 20% of the players that shift games. And the last 5 minutes of footy in each game, when the game's on the line, you need to lock down on the 20% of the opposition that are going to hurt you. They didn't lock down on Nick Daicos, and he knew that it was closing time. And is there a better player in the comp come closing time? Don't think there is there?
It was so good to see. And, yeah, Geno used to say in the last 5 minutes, find the player who's going to beat you and make sure that he doesn't. And Walsh was powerless against him.
Yeah. So the more you drill down onto what Nick's doing, the more you're blown away with the reality of the numbers and the influence. And, you know, where to? Like, where does this guy get to? You know, it's discussion for another day. But what a journey he's taken Collingwood on, and he's got them back in the race.
Yeah, his markers are running ahead of Chris Judd, and he's the modern benchmark for it.
I thought it was a great coaching performance. All ends up, you know, how do you minimise the damage that the Geelong small forwards are able to impact on the game, while keep the ball out of the corridor and keep the game in low speed. Now, we hate it from a spectator point of view, but you know, he'll do what he has to do in a one-off performance to get the deal done. So they played wide. They took every uncontested mark they could take, but they would go forward. It would be the umbrella ball use across the absolute fullback area to get to the other side, and then stay one-sided. So if the ball was turned over, you've still got to come back through Lever and May. But if you got to 60, 70, 80 from goal at the other end, then stop. You know that Geelong are going to retreat into their D50, and then you get the ability to locate. There's Close, there's Myers, there's Cameron, and they're able to just have great reference points to defend with what is normally a turnover when you go inside your forward 50. You mark a dozen of them, you turn over the rest. So you've got to defend your inside 50s more than you do attack. So they did that really well, and their ability to clamp those guys for long periods of the night. Now, Cameron wasn't really a factor till he was. Graham Myers wasn't a factor till he was, and Close the same. So in the end, the ability for McDonald to do the job for the large period of the night on Cameron was brilliant. Great matchup, athletically similar profiled, if you like. So I thought big win to Simon Goodwin. The Cats still came hard, and they take those big risks. Everything that Graham Myers does turns to gold. Holmes was brilliant, but in terms of what Melbourne were able to set up, they made their major pieces difficult to contend with.
And then had the big moments in the last quarter,
Yeah.
which is Max Gawn's goal and then Bailey Fritsch's stunner, his slider.
I've been talking about, the Melbourne fans love Bailey Fritsch, right? And I think that the whole football world is slow to recognise the brilliance of this guy and how good he is and how consistent he's been. And we've been talking about him for a little while. Thursday nights, we've had a lot of Melbourne games, and I don't know if he gets the love that he should. He's played as a full forward effectively for Melbourne for, this premiership window, and it has been brilliant to see him finish that goal. And again, we talk about closing time players. Nick Daicos was one, and I think Bailey Fritsch is another one. Always seems to find a way to kick the big goal when the game's in the balance late. So full credit to the Ds. Thought they were coached perfectly and got the job done. And you have to reassess where your thoughts are with the Ds. It wasn't on the back of necessarily Petrarca or Oliver or Viney. It was done through system, not individual talent, in my opinion.
And now the second leg of that is Carlton on Thursday night. So they've had these 2 games to give us the real read as to where they sit at the pointy end. So we thought we might put the Blues in the pressure index.
They're pressuring them.
And what Michael... So they've lost 3 of 4. And just a few little things that stood out in their game around... So if Simon Goodwin put on a coaching masterclass, a few of the tactical areas that you had in mind for Michael Voss.
Well, Vossi's... The clearance stuff is always a fascination for me with Carlton. It's just not... You feel like they're back and then they're not. You feel like they're here and then they're not. They were tactically taken to the cleaners with the setup around clearance. I thought the ability for Craig McRae to roll up extras at the front of Collingwood, at the front of Carlton's sort of stoppage exit and force them back, and the retreating handballs in the end were the reason why they invited the Collingwood pressure in. And once you invite that in, you've got to be able to handle it. And if you can't, you bleed. And that's exactly what happened. And I thought the coaching, and it's the bigger discussion and something that needs to be corrected. And we had this discussion last year around Jacob Wiedering. At round 10 last year, he was 41st in the competition for intercepts. And we kept saying, is Wiedering, is he really the man? Is he the leader down back, the absolute pillar of this back six? And again, just the more I watch him, he gets taken to redundant positions because he's diligent to an opponent. Now that's not what they need him to be. He's showed some vision last night. He's going up the ground with Will Hoskin-Elliott to a place the ball's never going to get to. Where what that does is it leaves Zach Williams, who was an awful matchup for Elliott, in the prime position that's likely to be where the ball goes. And you've got Lewis Young, who's not Jacob Wiedering, where the ball's likely to drop or land. So you got to flip those magnets. He's got to be better at putting himself in that spot and using the others as pawns. You go and pick him up. You go pick him up. I'm playing here. And I don't care who the matchup is. Does it really matter if it's Jamie Elliott? Does it really matter if it's Hoskin-Elliott or Myercheck or Cox? Or you go where you need to go to win the ball back for the team. Darcy Moore does it. Jeremy McGovern does it. Wiedering needs to do it. Now, I don't know whether that's a defensive coach issue or a Michael Voss issue or the players around him. They need to be saying, hey, Jacob, we need you here. So there's a shared responsibility here, but in the end, it has to be Wiedering that does it. He has to want to be the man. So their campaign now has to be around making Wiedering great again. So they need to address this and assess this and then say, where are we falling down? I know that McGovern's not there. I know that Sard's not there, but it's not really about those guys.
Yep.
So how do they do that, Gerard? Can they do that? If they don't do that, we have to reassess who they are again. But they've been disappointing.
What do you think at the other end? Are they one-dimensional going forward?
Well, of course they are, but they're pretty handy players.
That's right.
You know,
the push and pull of Friday night was all they had at various stages was Mackay and Curnow, and they were wedded to it until the one moment where they weren't wedded to it, which was the moment they probably needed to go to it when Mackay tried that centering up ball rather than playing to Curnow at the back.
Well, I've said this many times over the last few weeks. They're crying out for that third tall forward, that next player. And everyone says, it's De Koning. I don't know if it is De Koning because he's very rare you see a super tall type be that third tall effective forward. So I'm looking for the mid-sized player. And everyone says it's Jack Martin, but he's still a way away. Yeah, so how do you find who that player is? It's not Fantasia. I think we've worked that out. So we've mentioned Cripps in the past. I think they need to split his time more centre forward. Can they do that Dustin Martin role with Patrick Cripps? They've still got a lot of assets. They're still a very good football team, and right now at round 8 they've tipped over a little bit and lost a couple they shouldn't have, but have played some pretty good footy in losing. So if you get consumed with the loss, then you'll be flipping every 2 weeks like we can do. But assess the performance, beating a clearance, out of sorts with their matchup down back. We said Williams shouldn't have played last week. I thought he'd be lucky to get a game. Not only did he get a game, they put him on the opposition's best small forward. Well, that doesn't make sense to me. That was never going to pay the bills.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's scope for improvement, but there's work to do.
Maybe it's the same every year, so I wouldn't overstate it, but holding the ball is driving people mad. the state of the tackle and all. What's going on with the nuance of the tackle at the moment?
I don't want to assess every type of holding the ball or decision the umpires make, but what we've allowed to creep into our game is when you hold the ball tucked under one arm in one hand, so you've got possession of the ball and you're being tackled or retarded by the opponent on the other hand, on the other arm. It's up to you then to dispose of the ball correctly. For 100 years, you've had to manufacture a way to get that to your boot so that you don't get pinged. At the moment, that player is just rolling into the tackle and absorbing the tackle, and the umpire's saying, "Oh, no, he couldn't get rid of that. I'll ball that up." No, that hasn't been the way it's been seen for a long, long time. I think the AFL need to correct this one immediately, and even send out a little memo. Hey, this has slipped a little bit. We concede that. If you have possession of the ball, it is on you to get rid of that in a legal fashion. But it's okay that if we pay a few free kicks, isn't it?
Yeah. So my personal view, long term, is the game is better when you pay holding the ball. So you don't want to tip the game to a tackler's game. There is a fine line there, but the game is always better when you pay holding the ball. So we'll see ones where you'll get 12, 15 in one game. Those games are infinitely better than when the umpires opt not to pay them and you get 2 or 3 for the night. I'll argue all day long you can get total outliers where you get 20 plus, and we've seen those games, and yet that's you go too far. The game is fundamentally better when you pay holding the ball, and we have to prioritise the circumstances in what you're describing.
There was a couple yesterday in the Richmond Fremantle game that I just shake my head. How do you not see that? There was one on the wing where a player was tackled twice, and the second time stripped of the footy and play on and went for a goal, which pleased the Richmond fans no end. So I think that's an easy one. If you have possession of the ball in one hand and you're tackled, you can't just absorb the tackle. Even if you've had prior opportunity, you still have the ability to fashion a disposal. So it's on you to get rid of that footy. So I don't. That's the only one I'm hot on. The rest umpires call at the moment, in the moment. Then that's for, I'll live with that. But the one where they just absorb it, just clearly holding the ball in one arm, just fix it. Let's just move through this really quickly.
Did you have Owies in the find the fakers from the Maynard tackle?
I did, yeah. This is still there, isn't it?
Yeah, so you've educated me what to look for, and this did feel like it met your markers.
We cannot have players tipping their own head onto the ground and pretending that they're concussed or have had head trauma or have been dangerously tackled when the player who's tackling them hasn't done that at all. And they laughed about it and carried on, "Oh, we've got a goal out of this." No good for our game. Absolutely no good. And I'll say it again, I think fines are the only way. If you fine a player $5,000 for doing that, Gerard, I'm telling you, they stop it pretty quick. Warnings don't work, and we're discussing this around the edges. The game's gone too far to allow this to creep in. And when they cost goals, it's like the shrug and the duck. It's becoming a real issue for us. Players laugh about, suck the umpire in there. Nothing worse. The umpire feels like a fool. All players are angry, and it creates a real tension we don't need in our game, and the head must be protected, and we've got to protect the players from themselves.
They got that right. So this was the Sydney Swans. Got an awful lot right. And amongst the down-in-the-mouth Bulldogs fans are very up and about Swans fans on the temper text today.
Well, the power of three, I was going to call them the Sydney Roosters. Isaac Heaney, Errol Goulden and Chad Warner, they're just maximum damage players. So in the competition right now, the number one stat that I go to for players is score involvements. If you're not involved in scores, either saving them or creating them, what are you doing? You're just a numbers junkie. They have these three players, Heaney, Goulden and Chad Warner, ranked 1, 3 and 4 in the competition for score involvements.
Well,
first, Petrarca is second.
Yep.
So it's Heaney, Warner, Goulden, first, third and fourth. That is unbelievable. I have never seen that before. Three players from the same team in the top 4. So as a team, they're 15th for contested possession and they're 5th for clearances via differentials. As disposals, the Swans are ranked 16th. these three guys. I'll give you their ratings, right? Because you've got to look at the Swans in a different way. So if you look at these individuals, Heaney, Gould and Warner, for contested possessions, they're rated 5th, 33rd and 52nd. So not bad. Heaney having a great year. The other two, just okay. For clearances, 7th, 45th and 58th. Just average. Heaney, outstanding. The other two, just average. For disposals, 16th, 22nd and 43rd. Pretty solid. First, third and fourth. So every time they get it, you bleed. So in terms of the team scoring from stoppage, they're the third most potent. In terms of scoring from intercept, they are the most potent. So the Swans have a lot of assets with ball in hand. And as I said before, those three are hitting the scoreboard. I don't know if I can recall a player who's been redeployed into the midfield and had such an impact. What Isaac Heaney has done this year. So last year, he played 20% game time in the midfield, 20%. So because of the injuries at the start of the year with Mills and Parker, they've had to use him in the. He's been 85% midfielder this year, and has been unbelievable. Now Dustin Martin was changed. He went into that centre forward role under Damien Harvey back in 2017, and changed the game in a lot of ways. But I don't know if I've seen a player who was a nominal half forward, a pseudo centre half forward, really, go in and become this product. Can you recall anyone having such a drastic... He's the best player in the comp right now on all metrics, having played his first year as a midfielder at this age.
He's a bit of a pride of Jenny commodity.
Pride of Jenny.
Like a long way declared and suddenly became that. Wow.
Pride of Jenny, I love it. Pride of Sydney.
Wild card category today?
Yep.
What's happening with Toby Green?
Yeah, and I want to throw Tommy Papley in there as well. Like... Toby's kicked 9 goals for the year. I mean, he was kicking 9 goals every month, and Papley's only kicked the 12. These two teams are looking for these two to get on board. You know, Papley was their energizer bunny last year, and just doesn't look that same player, does he? He doesn't look as dynamic as what he has. You never know where they are at injury wise, so we just have to assess what we see, but. Yeah, Josh Kelly's kicked more goals than Toby Green. And Josh Kelly's playing on ball. Brent Daniels has missed some footy and has kicked more goals than Toby Green. We're talking about Darcy Jones and these other guys. I think they need the All-Australian captain of 2023 to wind back the clock a fraction. Not too far back. It's only we're 8 games. We're into the season now, though.
We are.
We need to start seeing some of Toby's brilliance again.
We're a third of the way through, so that's a big portion.
Yeah.
And it's just not there at the moment.
So we're going to keep an eye on them next couple of weeks and just see if they can lift.
You fatefully said last week, King.
Don't bring it up.
We had order. We got ourselves to a position where it would all make sense, and then it all got tossed out.
No.
There's 6 you want in the seedings this week. Well, there's 6 I want. Sydney, Geelong, Giants, Melbourne, Carlton, Collingwood. I want them all. So
last week I said there's 3 teams that won't be leaving my seedings till at least round 12.
Someone's got to come out.
One of them's out.
Yes. Beautiful. They should be volatile.
Yes, that's all we want.
Righto. So I'm going to declare up. I'm desperate to have Collingwood, but I can't figure out how to get them in. I've got a play-in game, Carlton and Melbourne, and I've got a play-out game, the Giants, Essendon. So they're just on notice as the Giants would want to rebound and beat Essendon. So 4. Who are you putting at 4?
I've got the Giants at 4. Tom Green went down, shifted things, changed things, strange game. They've been very good in the main, and I'm forgiving that performance against a pretty good team in the Sydney Swans. So they're at 4 for me.
I've got Melbourne at 4. So winner stays on, so pool style. Winner of Carlton Melbourne stays on. The Blues have now lost 3 out of 4, so I've had to sit them out.
Yeah,
I just can't find a place.
They're out of mine, unfortunately.
3?
3 for me, I've gone Melbourne. And again, your playing game, Carlton-Melbourne, obviously is a big one. Now, Melbourne, fantastic tactically on the weekend, execution of plan, terrific. And just showed, I think, a template to the competition of how to play against Geelong. Can you do it? Is another question that's still unanswered, but they're in good form, playing some pretty strong footy.
Giants at 3 for me.
Giants,
2?
Yeah. The Cats. Yeah, the Cats at 2. It was still a very good game. They weren't entitled to do what they did late, and they still made a charge. And if Cameron kicks straight, the first time he's missed his foot in his life, Great game, so I'm not sliding them too far.
Yeah, I got Geelong at 2 as well. So we've found a chord at 1.
The Sydney Swans.
Sydney Swans.
Yeah, so they've come in and gone bang. So they do it differently, and I'm not. I've got them at 1, but I'm almost looking at it thinking they do it so differently. It'll either be boom or bust because of the profile of their team. So I don't have Collingwood in, and I don't have Carlton in.
So Fremantle at Optus for the Swans, then Carlton at the SCG, which shapes as big, and then the Bulldogs at Mars before they get to their bye. So it's in their power to hang on to top position and the top seeding over the next little bit.
Outside of that, it's all namby-pamby, Gerard.